Hello to all you collective listeners. On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have a little bit of a different guest. One of the things that we talked about for the direction of this podcast was to make sure that we brought on guests who fit that sports performance model. So it doesn't all have to be strength coaches. We're looking more for dietitians, athletic trainers, mental skills trainers, anybody who may be within the realm of sport performance. I think this is so important to have these conversations because one, we need to understand what the day-to-day looks like for them as well. And then two, we need to understand, okay, what are their skills? What are the things that they provide? What's the value that they provide to the team? Because every member of the team is so crucial. So how can we best support them? And then on top of that, if we don't have a member of that team, what are some things that we can do to supplement our role as a sports performance or a strength coach? So on today's episode, we have Tess McCain. She's the director of Olympic nutrition here at Appalachian State University. I work very closely with her with all the teams I work with. She does a fantastic job of relating to the athletes, helping educate them, which is just so crucial because in my mind, there really is no strength and conditioning without nutrition. You have to eat first to live. So if we take care of that piece of the equation, then we understand that it's really one of the most important things. So on today's episode, we really talk about a lot of different things that I think are going to be valuable for strength coaches. And then also I wanted to kind of see, okay, if strength coaches don't have a dietitian to work with, what are some questions that may pop up? What are some things that they may want to know about dietitians, about nutrition, about how to best support their athletes? So I think you guys will really enjoy this episode, and thank you for listening. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Tess McCain, who's the director of Olympic Performance Nutrition here at Appalachian State. We were very closely together. Tess, it's fantastic to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Connor. I'm really excited to be here today.
I think everybody's really excited. I mean, especially to get a different perspective. This was something we talked about for the direction of the podcast, was to bring in more professionals that strength coaches work with on a regular basis. So, I want to keep it basic today because I want to help out all the strength coaches out there who may not have the resources to work with a dietitian, what that may look like. But to get into it, Tess, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and then we can roll from there.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my name is Tess McCain. I currently work at Appalachian State as the Director of Performance Nutrition for Olympic sports. Prior to this, I actually worked in the clinical setting in a hospital. So I worked with a variety of patients in that setting. And before that, I had my schooling. So I did my undergrad at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. Spent my 4 years there and then went to the University of Alabama in Birmingham, where I completed a combined 1-year dietetic internship and master's program. So essentially that's typically a split year, and that was a sped up version. So I had my master's program and then I also had the internship at the same time. After that, I sat for my boards exam, passed that, became an official registered dietitian, and here I am in the workforce.
Excellent. Well, you've been crushing it here at App State, so I'm glad that your path has led you to here. Now, the question I have, okay, and I think working with dietitians in the past has told me the right answer, and I may have just given it away. Is it nutritionist or is it dietitian?
It's dietitian. It's always dietitian.
So can you briefly explain to us what the difference is?
Definitely. Biggest difference is anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, right? You don't have to do that 4 years at an accredited university, then complete your 1,200 supervised practice hours in your internship. Actually, in 2024, it's required to have your master's to be a registered dietitian. And then you sit for that board exam, like I said. So once you sit for that exam, you actually have your certification, whereas anyone can take a little nutritionist certification, have a piece of paper that calls you a nutritionist. So there's a pretty big difference between the two.
No, I mean, certainly 1,200 hours of supervised work is nothing to laugh at whatsoever. So I understand that. And I know just in the past working with dietitians, it's always been a big point of contention. And I think that's so important. What you said is it is important to know where you're getting your information from, because anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. Anybody can be a strength coach, right? But you look at their certification, you understand, okay, there's a big difference between the skill level and experience that these people have.
Oh, 100%. I'm always telling my athletes, other coaches, people around here, especially when you're looking like on social media or you're seeing articles from people that put out the information, always look for those letters at the end. You want RD or LD. So that's going to be registered dietitian and licensed dietitian. That means they really have their certification. They know what they're talking about.
I was just about to ask you that. How do you navigate what that looks like? Because I mean, on Instagram, there's so many people who are, quote unquote nutritionists, and so we're looking for RD and LD. Those are the two.
Yes, sir. I would say if they do not have that in their name, it should be right behind their name. Then they are likely just a nutritionist and they haven't had the proper training to actually give the advice that they're trying to. They may have had some, some small training, have a little bit of education. Obviously, they know a little bit about what they're talking about, but I definitely think that gets into where some misconceptions come in, some information that may not be 100% correct because nutrition is going to be kind of different for everybody. So it may not be that one end all be all as a lot of things they say are made out to be.
Makes complete sense. Okay, and so you talk about these 1,200 supervised hours. This was under your dietetic internship, correct?
Yes.
And so, what was that experience like going through that full year program that you did at UAB?
That was honestly one of the best years of my life. I think it was the hardest year that I've ever had to experience, but for me, especially, it was where everything clicked. Going from my undergrad, where I was learning, medical nutrition therapy, learning these tube feeding calculations, not really sure how I would be applying them, to then go into the internship where you navigate community rotations. So you may be in a school setting, in like a um, health coalition kind of setting where people are like the Meals on Wheels, something like that. Or the clinical setting where you're in the hospital, you're seeing, renal patients, so people with different kinds of kidney issues, heart issues, stroke issues, different things like that. So you really are thrown into every kind of opportunity you would have to work as a dietitian, which I thought was just, a priceless opportunity to see where I thought I would kind of best fit.
And that's so interesting to me because, again, I mean, I'll throughout this episode, I'll probably keep drawing comparisons to the strength coach experience. But I mean, almost everybody's internships all are strength and conditioning related based off of athletic performance. So, everybody's going to do something where, whether it's working with a high school team, working with a collegiate team, it's all going to be related to specific athletic performance, not general physical therapy or athletic training or things that kind of come in and as more of a holistic view. Do you feel like that's kind of helped you as an RD?
Oh, 100%. I remember, going into my food service rotations, right? So that's about 5 weeks in the food service setting. I was not looking forward to it. And yet here I am working as the director of Olympic performance dietitian. I'm running my own fuel station. So I have to make sure we have like sanitation in practice. I'm doing a lot of ordering and receiving, a lot of these kinds of things that I didn't really think would apply to me that are now completely being applied. So honestly, it was extremely helpful.
And I can only imagine. And so, what was that experience like? Now, you said you worked for a year as a dietitian within the clinical setting, so at a hospital. What was that experience like there versus now in the athletic setting?
It's definitely a completely different world. I mean, you go in for your 8:30 to 4:30 shift. You are in charge of a couple different floors. So, for example, I had like general med, I had an ICU floor, and you kind of see those patients based on if they screen up from a nursing screen. So once they typically come into the hospital, a nurse will ask them some questions. A lot of times it's, if you've lost any weight recently, if you've had any changes in appetite, things that would really constitute a dietitian referral. So I would, gather my patients for the day, go upstairs, see who I can. It was pretty difficult because we were, I think, definitely understaffed for the hospital that we were working at. So I'd have 15 plus patients in a day that I would try to see, which could be pretty challenging at times. So you go upstairs, see who you can see, and then it's a lot of charting. So it was a lot of sitting at my desk, which I really didn't expect and definitely did not love. I loved the patient interaction. I loved being able to talk with the patients as they come in, really help them. But they're also not really there for nutrition. They're there because they fell and broke their hip, or, they're having some kind of stomach upset, and it may not really be anything that they've thought about, that they want to care about. So I think the buy-in was a lot harder. It was a lot harder to make those connections with the patients in the hospital. And then, transitioning to an athletics environment where I don't really have a set schedule. I come in, every single day looks a little different, kind of depending on when we have the first morning lift, when the lifts are done at the end of the day, what kind of consults I have scheduled for the day. they've got any teams to be talking to, any cooking classes to do. So I think that's my favorite part is that every single day looks different. So it leaves it up to a lot of variety, and I'm always on my toes, which I love.
No, I know how packed your days can be.
Yep.
I mean, just from our discussions and where you go from, especially to service each team here as the sole dietitian. I mean, that's a pretty large undertaking. It's like a strength coach, working as the only strength coach for, 16, 18 teams. So the one thing I am curious though about from the clinical side to the athletic side, I feel like a lot of times people like to treat athletics as life or death. It really is this like environment where people will live and die by athletics, which I understand because of that competitive side. But what is it like working in athletics now when you were in a setting where it truly was life or death based off of, a lot of those things that they would see on the clinical side?
It's interesting. I really like talking the athletes down and letting them understand like this is not as either dramatic of a situation as you think it is, or maybe it is. And we do want to talk about like your long-term health and how this could affect that potentially down the line. But I think it's definitely been interesting navigating that because they have one thing happen to this then sometimes and it's the end of the world. So it's also just kind of some good, I think, teaching lessons for them and some maturing and growing up lessons too. You can't really handle every situation like that. So you really have to figure out, what is going to be more of a dire situation or not. And then in the hospital, I mean, that was pretty intimidating, right? I'm writing a tube feeding recommendation for someone who is intubated and sedated. And, that was something that I really had to kind of get over, especially first starting out in that setting. But you gain the confidence, right? With the experience, you gain the confidence, and you learn that you're the expert, truly, and you just learn to trust your judgment too in those moments.
And I think that's such a great perspective, especially for the athletes to have, like you said, and I think on the coaching side, it's easy to like take a step back and be like, it's not life or death. It's okay. But then I think about it when I'm 18, I would have treated it the exact same way. I would have been freaking out at every single thing because it's like, oh, if I don't get this, but if I didn't eat breakfast today, I might die at practice. You just never understand. So
Right.
that's a great perspective. So, okay, so we have time here, and I think, like I said, the biggest thing I want to do is kind of help give tools to strength coaches once they can kind of help supplement their dietitians that they may work with, and then two, a common trend is a lot of schools have strength coaches, but they don't necessarily have dietitians. I feel like athletic trainers are almost always the guarantee because of the medical necessity. And then strength coaches usually come in second. And then from a funding standpoint, usually the nutrition or the dietitian budget specifically is not there. So I kind of want to kind of dive into just different aspects of nutrition for athletes and what it looks like and how the strength coaches can help enhance that piece of the program.
Yeah.
So my first question would be, what are the biggest trends that you see now, or what are the things that you kind of have to spend most of your time working against or trying to help the athletes learn?
Think a lot of times it's just kind of figuring out meal timing, right? Meal timing, snack timing, hydration timing, what that looks like, and when the best time that is it is to get that in. They throw in full-time class schedules on top of their practices and lifts, and it seems like every minute of their day is busy. So it almost is the easiest thing to throw food under the rug, hydration under the rug. But I think that's a great opportunity for strength coaches to really, speak their voice, help these athletes in this moment. Maybe you don't have a dietitian, but maybe you can see them before the lift and just check in with them, right? Did everybody eat something before this? Is everybody planning to eat something after this? What's your hydration look like? I think a lot of these athletes need to be held accountable and they do need to be reminded. Unfortunately, we're not there to remind them all the time, but I think the more that we can, kind of get that at least across the board among trainers, among strength coaches, remind them to talk about it amongst themselves, right? I've got a lot of new incoming freshmen. And I'm always encouraging them, you guys are living with each other right now in the dorms. You guys are going to the dining hall together. You need to check in with each other 100% because you guys are on these teams. And so you can't be in this selfish mindset anymore of, oh, I missed breakfast. I'll get something in later before the afternoon practice. That later may never end up coming. And then you're feeling extremely fatigued through practice. You end up cramping because you're dehydrated, and it can really have an effect on the team as a whole. So also just kind of making sure they understand that you're affecting more than just yourself in this moment.
No, again, another great perspective to have. Absolutely. And, I think that's interesting to look at it from that standpoint because you are checking in on each other to make sure that you guys are all getting what specifically you need. So, and I'm interested on a couple other topics too. So we go kind of just rapid fire go through these.
Of course.
One thing I do want to talk about is weigh-ins as well. So for some sport coaches, weights are a really big deal. What's your ideal scenario for weigh-ins? How to approach those and how to kind of approach those with the athletes as well.
I think that is a great question and topic to bring up. I think, as the years go on, there's more controversy surrounding it. But it doesn't have to be looked at as such a negative thing, right? Like, I think if we look at it as a way of, helping the athletes stay healthy, protecting them, being preventative in that way, it can be much more positive. I'm a big proponent for blind weights just because I don't necessarily think it's important to see the weight. I think if the athlete has an interest, they've never expressed problems with their weight in the past, then it's fine. If they truly want to know, we can let them know. But otherwise, I just think it's not extremely necessary to know. But what I do think is, everyone comes in at the beginning of the year. I think that is a really good opportunity, right? Everyone get their weight taken. It can be blindly by the athletic trainer. And that's a really good kind of number to see as the semester goes on, make sure no one's losing a lot of weight, right? We don't want any drastic weight changes really throughout the semester, especially things that I often see, once season hits, we have athletes losing 10, 15 pounds, and that's really going to have an effect on their performance. So I think if we look at it that way as a way to keep the athletes healthy, keep them also accountable in that way, it can really be more positive. Also looking at it as a rehydration standpoint, right? We've got basketball players. I had one in my office last week, and he said he loses about 5 pounds in a practice. You have to know how to rehydrate after that. And honestly, the exact weight that you lose is going to be really helpful for rehydrating, making sure that you're getting enough fluid in afterwards to help set yourself up for success that next day.
And so how do you approach goal weights? Because, as a strength coach, I know that there's certain players who I understand, like even on the basketball team, right? We play in the Sun Belt. It's a physical league. So I understand, okay, if this person's about 10 pounds heavier, they're really going to be able to finish through contact more. They're going to be able to basically play to their strengths at a higher level, or on the flip side, if I know somebody who may benefit from losing a little bit of weight, it can help with their conditioning. It can make sure we kind of prevent injuries, which these are all positive things, but how do you approach these topics and how do you make sure it doesn't delve into the world of, potentially giving these athletes disordered eating or, leaning them towards an eating disorder?
So I think it's really important to give the athletes a little bit of their voice, right? I want to know what their goals are. That's pretty much the first thing that I ask any athlete when we're in a meeting, because I may have some strength coaches really pushing for one athlete to lose weight. But then when I talk to the athlete, there's a whole lot of history there and some, really big concerns that I definitely don't want to, bring up any past feelings or anything like that may cause even future problems later on. So I think it's really important to talk to the athlete and see how they feel, right? Because I want to know how they feel when they're performing, even when they're in the classroom, right? Like, how are you doing grades-wise? It's a lot more than just on the court. They are students first at the end of the day. And so I think that's a huge thing, right? How are you feeling? Are you feeling quick? Are you feeling slow? Are you feeling strong? Are you feeling weak? And then I really like to kind of go off of that. I do like to work with the strength coaches, especially if they, say you do have an athlete and you really want them in a specific weight. I'm 100% happy to talk about that too, because you may have some reasoning for that I don't know, and I may have some reasoning to also share. So really just working with other professionals in this athletic department, I think that's also a really good way to approach it.
And so, I mean, I do kind of want to dive into this relationship as well, too, because I think that's kind of the whole point of bringing on dietitians and bringing on athletic trainers and different people within the sports performance realm. Like, how do you navigate that relationship with the strength coach? How do you guys work as a team to make sure you get the highest quality care for the athlete?
So it's been pretty easy for me so far at Appalachian State. We only have 2 full-time strength coaches. Yourself and Robbie Orsi, both wonderful to work with. I think that you guys are both in positions where you've worked with dietitians before and you know the importance of it. But maybe you're in a position where you haven't worked with a dietitian before. And the biggest thing I could see happening is, some people being maybe stuck in old ways. So I think with that, biggest thing, right? Like the research is always changing, it's always growing. Just also presenting that to strength coaches. I know y'all are very scientific and evidence based, as are we. And I think that's a great way to approach it too. Truly show them the numbers, show them the science, show them the improvements that could be made by making little changes, but also meeting them where they are as well, right? I'm never going to come in and completely switch up everything that a strength coach has been doing, but I may be a little annoying and push and push and push until you understand where I'm coming from. Because I think if I'm coming from it that many times with that much, fire behind it, there's a reason.
No, it certainly makes sense. So, okay, and now I guess I'm also curious. What is the kind of elevator pitch that you have for dietitians? I obviously know the importance. I mean, I harp on it nonstop. I mean, our recruiting speeches, we do a lot of them together, and pretty much I tell them like, I mean, my direct quote is actually, none of this matters unless you're taking care of your nutrition, because I mean, the fuel is what actually prepares you for each workout. So obviously that piece of the equation is important, but for schools who don't necessarily have the funds, or are kind of in that in between where they don't really understand the importance of a dietitian. I know a lot of schools have part-time dietitians where that person can't really develop that time with the athletes, so then it ends up not being the highest quality care. What's your kind of quick pitch on the importance of a dietitian and what they can do?
Well, I mean, we are more than just a meal plan, right? And I'm more than making shakes. I'm going to educate these athletes. And they come into college and they've never had this education before, which is honestly crazy. I think that that's really where it needs to start. They're coming in here expected to eat a certain way, but none of them have been educated on how to eat in that way. So I think one, just showing how important we can be in that way, right? Talking about what that looks like, team talk, even like cooking classes, or, maybe you don't have a kitchen that you can use. Those talks like I was talking about, or getting, the whole kind of all the athletic teams together in one way. But I think the biggest thing is just understanding like nutrition is that game changing factor. And we expect them to be at practice, we expect them to lift, but you can't do anything without fueling yourself beforehand. And just hearing it from the athletes too, right? Like maybe you don't have money. Like you said, there's plenty of schools that do have a part-time dietitian. And I think even just starting with that, right? Like it is a growing field. You look at the success rates of teams that have dietitians versus teams that don't have dietitians. And then even just adding that one part-time position and hearing that feedback from the athlete, I guarantee that even if it's a part-time position where the dietitian is overwhelmed, they don't feel like they can get nearly as much done as they would like, I think they will still make that impact on the kids just by having that resource to go to and ask these questions. I'll be sitting in my office, I'll be behind the fuel station, and it's a perfect opportunity for athletes to come by and ask quick questions about supplements, food, snacks, hydration, really anything. And that kind of time with them is priceless, truly.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Again, I've worked with a dietitian pretty much my entire career as a strength coach, so I know what can be done through the work of a dietitian as well. And I think the important piece to me, and why I think it's so important, is because they're sick of hearing from me. Because I talk to them about sleep, I talk to them about recovery, I talk to them about mobility, getting extra work in, what that looks like. Okay, if coach got upset during practice, I got to talk him down before a lift. There's a bunch of different things that I have to talk to them on a daily basis, and I kind of end up being an extension of the coaching staff as well, because I'll be at practice. So they see me so much. I think it's really nice to have a fresh lens and have somebody else kind of come in who can be outside of the situation and can kind of remove themselves and just say, hey, I'm just here to help you as a resource. I don't really care about minutes or anything like that. Like all I care about is helping you out.
Definitely. I think it's like you just said, almost like that unbiased opinion. I don't see you all the time, but this is a great kind of resource for you to also get away from maybe the coaching staff too, right? And take a break and talk with someone else who doesn't necessarily know everything that's going on, so they can have a really fresh perspective on it too.
No, certainly. I think that's fantastic. So, okay, there's a couple of topics I really want to touch on too. Just like I said, trying to give these people resources as much as possible. So, a fueling station. Okay, give us your like bare bones, like minimum. You absolutely have to have these, and then kind of your ideal fueling station. If you could walk us through both.
Okay, so this is pretty interesting too, just coming in for myself. I actually got into the sports nutrition at Tennessee in my undergrad. So we're at a school where they have beautiful fueling stations, every product under the sun. The athletes can truly, get whatever they want. So coming here to App State, we have wonderful resources here as well. We have a great fueling station, but there's one dietitian, our budget's not nearly the same. So that was really interesting for me to navigate myself. I think bare bones, you need some pre and post workout nutrition because that's what the athletes are coming in for. Typically, they're going to be coming by the fuel station. It'd be great, I think, if it's located in or near the weight room because that seems to make the most sense and just be most easily accessible for the athletes. But I think that pre and post nutrition is the perfect opportunity to, one, get more education put out to the athletes, right? Every time you come in for a workout, you need to be having some quick carbs. So by quick carbs, you could have something like applesauce, Quaker Chewy bars, pretzels. It could be minimal for sure, but just even like a couple different options there. And then emphasizing that post-workout. So chocolate milk, right? I mean, we get probably 50 cartons of chocolate milk for $15. A lot of schools that I've also talked to are able to have milk, can't think of the word, but the milk is supplied to them from these local farms. So lots of times they're not even paying for the milk. But that's a great option for post-workout. It's got a 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio, which is ideal for recovery. You want to get the protein in to start rebuilding the muscles, but you also want to make sure you're having carbohydrates to refuel, right? Because they've been working out for 45 minutes or an hour. They're going to be tired. Their muscles are going to be tired, but they probably still have stuff to do for the rest of the day. So you definitely want to make sure they're having some carbs in afterwards. And then, ideal fueling station, right? The list goes on. I think really what's something that's difficult that I find is sitting here with these athletes, telling them, especially when we've got like weight gainer guys, and I'm like, you need to be eating every 2 hours, truly. But I can't necessarily give them the means. So I'd say, in a perfect world, and even a couple years from now, if we could provide meals for the athlete, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that would be ideal. Even having like catered breakfast burritos or something like that the athlete can grab after a workout. We do protein recovery shakes. So, having fresh fruit or frozen fruit, protein powder, milk or juice, having some different options like that. But I think in an ideal world, we'd be able to feed the athlete every single meal and snacks in between.
No, certainly. And I mean, I agree with you on this because I'll bring this up to the listeners. Like something that we've done is with our extra money in the budget is really focus it towards nutrition for our basketball players. So on the men's side, I think it's like the total cost is around 250 per month for this whole deal. We end up making 4 meals per week for all of our weight gain protocol that we have. So it's about 6 guys on the team that we really want to focus on gaining weight. I will make them. It's 2 cups of rice, a half can of chicken, and then 2 cheddar cheese blocks. And each of those players gets 4 per week because this is all coming out of the men's basketball budget. So we were able to kind of use that money to then enhance what we can give to our athletes. So I've noticed a difference certainly from a standpoint of, okay, if we are telling them to get these extra meals in, right, and they don't have this time. So now we're trying to work on 3 meals. So it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then, okay, now on top of that, I also want you to find time to make really an extra 2 full meals. And then I want you to snack in between on top of that. I think that it starts to get unrealistic about what you can actually expect from the athletes. So doing those chicken and rice, it was really nice because it allows us to basically give them an extra meal that they don't have to worry about and tell them this isn't a replacement. This is a supplement like we're talking about. This is like that 4th, 5th meal that we're talking about. Now we still need quality breakfast. We still need quality lunch on top of that. But I've certainly noticed it's made a difference for our athletes for sure. I think if any of the listeners do want to know, you can reach out to me and we can talk specifically about what that process looks like. But I mean, super simple. Literally just make rice in a rice cooker and then divide out the can and the chickens in a meal prep container. So that's been really successful for us here.
No, definitely. And I think that you found a great way to use, what resources you do have, right? Rice can be pretty cheap. Canned chicken can be pretty cheap. You can make do with not very much. And the athletes, like you said, of course they're going to love it. And I think they are going to see a difference in that too, right? They're actually given a meal, which makes it 10 times easier on them to eat the meal. And then, it just makes everything easier. But I think that's one of the biggest things. Yeah, is just we don't necessarily have all the means that we are telling these athletes that they need to be eating.
And then I think a follow up too is the secret weight gain hack is certainly Uncrustables. Like, I think, I mean,
Uncrustables and
like,
chocolate milk.
I'm like, here you go. Here's Uncrustables all the time. Uncrustables, Uncrustables. Uh, and then another thing we have implemented too that's, I just want to kind of let the listeners know is as part of that weight gain protocol, we also do apple juice for each of our weight gain guys afterwards too, because that's just a quick. It ends up being about like 150 to 200 calories based on the serving size, and we mix it with cytocarb. Another thing that we've been really fortunate on both the men's and women's sides that our coaches understand, and I think because I've just nonstop talked about the importance of nutrition, but they've given us that money to allow us to do extra work and then basically get extra resources for these athletes. So we've been doing that as well for our weight gain people. I feel like that's really helped out on top of that too. So Uncrustables, apple juice, chocolate milk, chicken and rice. Not too
Easy.
hard.
Done.
There you go. And then everything's perfect. You don't have to worry about anything ever again.
Oh, if only it was that easy, right?
If only. That'd be super nice. Yeah. Okay, so then now I also want to talk about supplements a little bit. First off, what are kind of the supplements that you would really recommend for athletes?
Okay, so right off the bat, multivitamin, right? I think that's definitely kind of one of those that can cover their bases, especially if we've got some pickier eaters. Multivitamin, vitamin D, especially if you live somewhere where you may not see the sun very much. Boone, for example, I feel like from the months of September to May, we're pretty much in a dark, rainy cloud. So that's a perfect time to have that supplementation in also. There's a lot of research behind vitamin D and mental health as well. And I feel like we see that kind of decline in mental health in our athletes too throughout those winter months. So I think another just great preventative measure. Calcium can be extremely beneficial, especially I think lactose intolerance and not drinking milk is an upward trend right now. And I see it among my athletes, but it's a really important part of their diet that they are missing out if they're not having that. So my biggest thing with supplementation is if you're not getting it through your diet, there can be a place for it. So calcium, and then probably omega-3 fatty acids. So especially if we have athletes who, say they have a concussion, I want to get them on that immediately to really help reduce any swelling, help reduce that inflammation. And that's something that I honestly think any athlete could be on. Most athletes lack it in their diet anyway. But like I said, really great for reducing that inflammation, which, athletes are always in kind of a state of stress. So anything to help with that. And then potentially like magnesium, that's also going to help with calcium being absorbed into the bone. It can be a great sleep supplement as well. Maybe they want to take it at night. But I would say multivitamin, calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, and omega-3s. Not maybe all of them for one athlete, but definitely kind of depending on what's going on, those would kind of be the best.
Well, it's extremely interesting. You didn't say taurine or, exactly. You didn't immediately go into those. You covered the bases of nutrition. I don't know if we can buy into this right now.
Well, let me tell you, the best athletes are on very few supplements, right? They should be getting everything through their food, most everything through their food. If they're putting the work and the intention behind eating and hydrating, then they should be getting that variety through their diet, hitting their different macronutrients, getting all the vitamins and minerals through that. And then there may still be a place for or a need for supplementation, but very little.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's obviously, you want to get the most nutrients from your diet as much as possible. Everything from whole foods. I mean, I feel like that's usually going to be the best situation for you. So,
For sure.
okay, and so now creatine is another one I want to ask you about because this is one that our athletes always kind of come ask me. Luckily, I can say just go talk to Tess. But what are your thoughts on creatine, and then kind of your main points for taking it?
So I think creatine is a great supplement. I've learned a lot about it over this past year, especially being in the sports setting. Had a lot of athletes come and talk to me about it, and they have expressed a lot of concern. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is there's so much information out there that either says it's bad, says it's going to make you gain weight, all this kind of misconception behind it, where if you're using it properly and consistently, it should have nothing but positive effects on you. So it's really going to be helpful for, improving recovery. So enhancing that recovery time. So you should be able to kind of recover quicker. Also really helpful for those muscle gains. So really any guys that come to me, ladies as well, that are interested in gaining weight, I always say, 5 grams of creatine a day would be a great supplementation. Typically, you'll see, a powdered form or a pill form, and either one is fine. And typically that serving size is about 5 grams. So say you've got the powder and you have a scoop, you can just take that 5 grams to take it every single day. I think the biggest thing is consistency with creatine. I've seen a lot of people, they're so concerned with the timing of it, but the biggest thing is just making sure that you're taking it every single day.
Oh, excellent. We appreciate the insight on creatine. I feel like that really is kind of the biggest supplement that I hear about nowadays. And I do think the education piece of a lot of the nutrition has kind of come to fruition a little bit. Not to make a pun or play on words there, but I feel like what I kind of have conversations with athletes about is much different now than it is, let's say 3-4 years ago. I mean, especially when the documentary like Game Changers came out, where it was all about complete veganism within athletes and kind of combating some of those areas, which I understand there's certain, especially from religious or dietary restriction standpoints, some people may need to be vegan, but at the same time, it's I kind of, you can disagree with me here. I think that can kind of cut you at the legs a little bit from your availability, just because of your options, like we talked about. If you were trying to get so many meals per day, why make it harder to where you also have all these extreme restrictions on top of that too?
Right. And these athletes don't even have really prior nutrition knowledge. So now they're deciding to go vegan once they get to the college, and they have no idea how to properly eat in that way. I always tell my athletes, you are not the average person. That means you can't eat like one. You can't eat like these TikTok what I eat in a day. You can't be looking at that for inspiration. You guys have to eat to perform, and that's going to look different for everyone, but it's definitely going to look different from the general population. So whatever looks cool right now, whatever looks trendy, you probably should be steering clear of it.
No, I think that makes complete sense, and that's it's very similar as well in the strength and conditioning world too. I mean, from a standpoint of you see all these cool things on Instagram, and it's like, oh, I want to try these out immediately, and it's like, no, you can't just go in and do balance work for an hour and expect that to work for your team.
Right. So, again, look for the letters RD.
There you go. RDLD. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so then my final question on supplements is, obviously supplements are a tricky situation from a standpoint of if you don't have the highest quality, you can test positive on a drug test from the NCAA. So what resources can strength coaches have to kind of check and make sure that if they don't have a dietitian, they can cross-reference and see, is that supplement approved through the NCAA? Will it not cause a positive drug test?
No, that's a great question, especially talking about creatine. That's one of our creatine, protein powder. Those are two supplements that typically would have, some bland substance in it. So what I like to use is the NSF for Sport app. It's really easy. You download it on your phone. You can type in pretty much any brand or product that you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for an energy drink that's NSF certified. It will pull that up, and it will show you the few options that have been third-party tested. So that third-party testing is really kind of what guarantees you that it's not going to be contaminated with something that's likely going to make you at risk when it comes to drug testing. You can also go on the NCAA's banned substance list, and they have all of the banned substances listed out into different categories like stimulants. And so I'm always kind of checking that as well, cross-checking that with ingredients listed on a supplement or, on a product. But that NSF for Sport app has been really helpful.
And so now I'm curious too, this just made me think of something else. How do you deal with NIL deals from a standpoint of now in college athletics? This is a big piece. So let's say somebody ends up getting sponsored by Celsius, which is commonly known to most likely cause you to have a positive drug test for the NCAA. How do you approach those with those athletes? Do you tell them they can't have the NIL deal with them? What does that look like?
I actually just dealt with my first NIL deal recently. So I was navigating this for the first time as well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the athlete, right? They're going to sign the contract. I can't tell them not to. But what I can do is educate them and give them the resources to understand what risk they're taking on by, signing with this NIL deal. Probably going to end up getting drug tested a lot more throughout the season and throughout the school year. They may, put themselves at risk for taking a banned substance. But, especially like the Celsius, that's a great example. With energy drinks and caffeine is what that banned substance is. everyone metabolizes it differently. So by saying, you can't drink more than 3 energy drinks in a day, that may not be true for everyone else. You may end up building a tolerance, and then, that tolerance is high enough to test positive, and you didn't think that it would even be high enough to test positive. So I always just tell my athletes, don't even risk it. But they're going to take it on because, it can be a great source of income for them. I totally understand that. But then also just giving them that same education, right? We're going to talk about caffeine. We're going to talk about the risks. If they're handing that product out, I also want them to be able to kind of share some of that information with maybe other athletes that they're sharing the energy drinks with, just to kind of give them that heads up too, right? Like there is a limit on this and you need to be smart about it because you're going to build up a tolerance, and energy is never going to be replaced from caffeine. You always should really be getting it through food.
And so, how common is, now that we're on the topic of caffeine, how common do you see issues with caffeine with collegiate athletes?
All the time. I've got some baseball players. They're walking in with their Monster Energy drink. They scoop their 300 milligrams of pre-workout, and I'm just like, how are you not, bouncing off the walls? But they've built up that tolerance. So honestly, I love where my office is located in our building. I'm right here in the weight room, so I see the athletes every time they're coming into lift. So really, with me, I try to address them when they're doing it. Um, if I see them with it, I'm going to talk to them. What's in that supplement? Let's take a look at it. Why are you taking that? Have you eaten anything? Like, are you using this truly as your energy source? It's everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. So I think just really kind of attacking it when you can and not being naive about it. They're going to drink energy drinks. They're going to drink caffeine, but let's just educate them on how to do it, right? I wouldn't suggest doing it, in the afternoon. Don't do it close to bed. It does have a 6-hour half-life, so it's going to stay in your system for that long. So if we've got, athletes drinking a Celsius before a 6 p.m. game, they're probably going to have a lot of trouble going to sleep that night. There could also be a lot of like stomach issues related to it. Like I've got a lot of athletes who they're drinking coffee first thing in the morning, then they're going to class. They never really have an appetite, but caffeine is going to suppress your appetite. So also just kind of, helping in that area, helping them to understand that the caffeine is never going to replace what they'd be getting from food.
And I mean, strength coaches themselves and myself, I'm certainly guilty of that, So I'm sure everybody listening right now is, kind of looking away or not trying to listen to this specific section. But and so, okay, now, like you said, it's going to happen. So it's just educating them about that. So, what about a topic like alcohol for athletes? Especially, I mean, it can be a touchy situation because, we have 18 and 19-year-old athletes on the teams, but we also understand that things like that are going to happen. So, how do you approach those conversations with the athletes?
I think one of the hardest things is telling them, do not do this, right? Like you tell them 100% this is off the table, it's probably going to put it on the table for them. So again, just being smart about it. If you're in season, like you should not be drinking. You probably have a game every 3 days. So you probably don't even have time to be doing that. But also just really helping them understand like alcohol is going to affect your performance. It can affect it 2 to 3 days after you end up drinking. So if you're drinking on a Wednesday and you have a Friday game, you're probably going to be performing a lot worse than you would be. It's also going to, mess up your concentration. Your focus is not going to be nearly as on, your coordination, which all of those things, right, can definitely lead to an accidental injury. You may end up getting sick easier, kind of like putting down on your immune system. So really just kind of telling them like it's so much more than going out right now and having some drinks with your friends. Like think about what you have going on, because you did sign up for this. That's the biggest thing, right? Yes, you're here in college, but you signed up to be a D1 athlete. So you don't necessarily get to do everything else that everyone else gets to do.
No, I think that's a fantastic approach to it. And it's like exactly like you said earlier. You're not a regular person, so you can't eat like a regular person. You're not a regular person, so you can't drink like a regular person. You can't do all these things. There is an aspect of having fun, but it's also a balance. You have to understand that you're here for something. You're most of the time on scholarship to be here. So you have to take this as seriously as possible.
100%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all this fantastic information. I think it was really helpful, especially for people who may not have the resources. So I really appreciate that. With these last kind of few minutes, I want to open the floor to you. I want to give you the floor. So, really, is there anything that you want to, get off your chest about nutrition? Anything that you kind of want to say to strength coaches? Anything at all?
I would just say if obviously if you have a dietitian and you have that resource, use them when they're there at the school. It may be a situation like this where there's one, but I'm sure that they are trying just as much and they would want to work with the teams, work with you. So even like reaching out, but definitely use them if you have them. And if you don't have them, look up statistics, reach out to other strength coaches that do work with dietitians and hear kind of what that difference is so that you can also have a little bit of leverage maybe when you're talking to your boss or talking to administration about where can we take our program. Let's add a nutrition department, especially if that's lacking. I think that's 100% the next step. Because like we said earlier, it goes hand in hand with lifting, with practicing. If they're not fueled well, they're not going to perform well. And I think it's time we have to see that for sure. 100%.
No, I think that's fantastic, and I'm glad you drove that point home because that is one thing that frustrates me too. And when you look at the sports performance team, it's I typically view it as the dietitian, the strength coach, the athletic trainer, and then hopefully your school has some sort of sports performance mental resources. So but that's usually not realistic. So if we look at this team of three that it typically ends up being, use each other, right? You guys are advertisements for each other. Like our athletic trainer here, Regina Parquet, is fantastic. She will also understand and tell the guys like, hey, this is pain. I think we can practice through this today. Or, if this is something that puts them at potential risk for more injury, we'll slow you down. I'll be there. They'll be your best advocate. So why would I not have them go to her and support her as much as possible? And the exact same thing with working with you. Why would I not have the athletes go talk to you as much as possible? I have a general understanding of nutrition. I can tell you the basic facts. I took 2, 3 nutrition classes. I've been lifting for a long time, so it's been something that's interested me. I've even read 1 or 2 advanced textbooks that has absolutely nothing on 1,200 supervised hours going through a full master's program and a full undergrad program of dietitians. And so, why would I not advocate for? If you're asking me nutrition questions, you should be going to Tess. I can help you kind of supplement in between. Okay, if you don't know what a quick carb is, I'll let you know so you can eat this before the lift. But any of the larger conversations should really be headed towards you. So I think that's a fantastic point to end on. If you do have a sports performance team, make sure you use it and you're advocates for each other, because the more I say, hey, Tess is fantastic, Tess does a great job, the more the athletes are going to say, yeah, they're not even going to beat you and say, yeah, Tess is the best. I mean, but that's how it works. So be positive advocates for each other, because I think ultimately it's just mutually beneficial for everybody involved.
Definitely. And it takes something off your plate, right? If you're over there telling the guys all the time they need to be eating, they need to be hydrating, like we said earlier, it's a different person telling them the same thing. And it can make a big difference too. And it's just giving you more time to focus on strength and conditioning and to do your job. So I definitely think in that sense too, it can take something off of your plate.
Absolutely. Well, Tess, thank you so much. I thought this was a fantastic episode. I really appreciate your insight on things, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you so much. It was great. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.